And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Sunday, November 5th, and here is your Alaska marine weather. Coming up to start early in the week, looking at the sea ice on this Sunday, though, we have ice that continues to develop across the Arctic coast, down in through areas of Kotzebue Sound, and also along the especially northern side of the Yukon Delta and the southwest end of Norton Sound. Of note, strong winds will continue along the Arctic coast tonight into Monday and Tuesday. We expect gale force winds out of the east-northeast upwards of 30-40 miles an hour, which will continue to cause blowing snow and also shifting in ice. And in any open areas of water, there could be some significant freezing spray. For the weather map and how things will evolve coming up here, we have an area of low pressure in the Gulf that will be situated by early Monday morning in this position, north central Gulf, in the process of weakening. A low out here in the central bearing will continue east-southeastward along this frontal boundary, and as we get into Monday afternoon, still a weak low out over the northern Gulf, but the main weather feature we'll be watching is this double barrel area of low pressure. This low will work its way southeastward, but the main energy is right here that'll ride along the Aleutians Monday into Monday night. And these two systems will re-enter and the energy just consolidate into a stronger low in the North Pacific, just south of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians by Tuesday afternoon. And as the system tracks northeastward up into the western Gulf, it is going to be accompanied by gale and even some storm force wind gusts along a frontal band that'll influence much of the Gulf. And on the to the north and northwest side of the low, we expect some snow, especially in the inner coastal mountains along the Gulf. And as that moisture gets pushed farther inland into areas of south central, including the Anchorage Bowl, we could be looking at snow and it possibly even mixing with or changing over to some freezing rain and rain in some locations. So this could be a rather impactful storm system as we go through midweek, especially Wednesday and Thursday. But as early as late Tuesday night, we're going to see at least gale force winds impacting Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait. In the meantime, though, Monday's forecast look for southeast to south winds 10 to 15 knots, inner channels of the Panhandle, waves 3 feet, outer coast west winds 15 to 20 knots, Sitka southward waves 8-9 feet. Winds will be south-southeast 15 knots west of Gustavus all the way to Cape Suckling with waves of 8 to 9 feet. On Tuesday, look for south to southeast winds 15 knots and waves 2-3 feet generally across the inner channels, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, Dixon Entrance. The outer coast, Gustavus southward, look for southwest winds at 20 knots, waves running 7-8 feet. Winds will be southeast to east as you get to outside of Yakutat Bay with 6 to 7 foot waves. The northeastern Gulf, or northwestern Gulf rather, relatively quieter conditions. We have variable winds off of Hitchinbrook Entrance. Northwest winds of 15 knots, 2 foot waves, Prince William Sound. Variable knots, variable winds around 10 knots here up in the north end of Cook Inlet. But still rather brisk westerly 30 knot winds out of the entrance there of Cook Inlet. And then on Tuesday, notice winds are going to start to shift around to the east and northeast. East winds 10 knots within Prince William Sound with 2 foot waves. But as we get down off the Kenai and down through middle and lower Cook Inlet, look for northeast winds increasing to 25 knots with waves of 5 to 7 feet. And winds across this area Tuesday night will be increasing to gale force to at least 40 knots as that low begins to lift northeastward into the western Gulf. Now, across Kodiak Island on Monday, winds will be westerly at 25 knots. And as we work our way down the Alaska Peninsula, look for west to southwest winds upwards of 30 knots, waves running 4 to 7 feet on the North Pacific side and 7 to as much as 10 feet there north of Cold Bay. On Tuesday, winds will start to increase, especially through some of the funneling there through Shelikof Strait, 40 knot northeasterly winds, waves building up to 10, 11 feet. Look for east-northeast winds, 30-35 knots here, especially on the North Pacific side with waves running up around 9 to 11 feet. On the Bering side, look for northeast winds, 25 to 30 knots with waves of 7 to 9 feet. And on Monday for the Aleutians, the eastern and central Aleutians, look for generally west winds around 25 to 30 knots, but picking up to gale force 35 knot winds around Atka and further west. We could see 40 to 45 knot gale force west to southwest winds from Atka through Kiska, and waves on the North Pacific side 8 to 11 feet, but higher west of Adak. And from around outside of Dutch Harbor to north of Adak, 9-10 foot waves. But once you get west of Adak, waves could be up around and over 15 feet. For Tuesday, in the wake of that system that's going to be shaping out in the North Pacific on the other side of the Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds of 35 to 40 knot gale force winds. Those will extend all the way to Adak, and then further west they fall off to northerly at 15 to 20 knots around Kiska and Shemya. But, excuse me, in the eastern Aleutians, we're anticipating waves could be as high as 14 to 18 feet. Along the southwest coast, east winds 10 knots there within Bristol Bay on Monday, southwest winds 15 knots into Kuskokwim Bay. As a frontal boundary swings through, west winds to 30 knots at St. Paul and St. George. And look for easterly winds out of Norton Sound in the lower portions of the Yukon Delta, 15 to 20 knots. And then on Tuesday, winds will be northeasterly as high as 25 knots out of Bristol Bay, northwesterly around St. Paul to 30 knots with 12-foot waves, and then northeast to north winds 15 to 20 knots through Norton Sound and especially down along the outer coastal areas of the Yukon Delta, including Hooper Bay with waves there of 3-4 feet. And then along areas of the Bering Strait, north side of St. Lawrence, northeast winds 10 to 20 knots, waves 2 to 5 feet. Easterly winds through the lower Chukchi Sea around 15 knots, 3 to 5 foot waves. But once you get up around Wainwright, up through Utqiagvik to Kaktovik, brisk easterly 35 knot gales with waves running 8 to 10 feet in any areas of open water, along with considerable blowing spray. Freezing spray as well. And then a continuation on Tuesday, look for easterly gales to 35 knots from Point Lay on up through Utqiagvik and Kaktovik with, again, heavy freezing spray possible where there's any areas of open water, and blowing snow as well along the coast. Waves 7 to 9 feet as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea, south of Point Hope, west of Kotzebue Sound, northeast to east winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet, and then passing through off of Wales and Port Clarence, winds will be northeasterly 10 knots, but as much as 20 knots with 4 to 5 foot waves on the north side of St. Lawrence Island.